Since Muammar Gaddafi seized power in 1969, Libya was not merely a state seeking a new political identity, but a laboratory for one of the most bizarre and oppressive experiments in the Arab world. Under the slogan of the Jamahiriya and the guise of the revolutionary committees, the country was transformed into an open stage for arbitrary arrests, show trials, executions, broadcast live on air, and massacres behind bars. This repression did not stop within Libya's borders. It extended abroad through bombings in Europe, assassinations of opponents, and support for armed movements at the far west. Between the Abu Salim prison, turned into a mass grave, and the Lockerbie bombing that changed the course of international relations, Libya remained in the grip of an authority that mixed the Green Book with the blood of innocents. Yet, the deeper question remains: how did the Jamahiriya project transform into a machine of collective punishment? And how did the 2011 uprising reopen these dark chapters, putting Gaddafi and his men on the court of history? In this video, we will journey together through the stations of repression and bloodshed, from public executions in sports stadiums to international arrest warrants, to read together the bloody record of a regime that ruled for 4 decades without accountability. Its fall opened a door that remains ajar, the door of justice and memory. Stay with us until the end, and don't forget to support us by liking the video and subscribing to the channel to receive all updates. Since 1977, Muammar Gaddafi launched a political and social project called the Revolutionary Committees, making them the backbone of what he called People's Authority. However, these committees were not just organizational frameworks, but turned into a repression apparatus monitoring every detail of Libyans' lives. They were tasked with controlling society, pursuing any dissenting voice, and sowing fear in universities, unions, and state institutions. The activities of these committees were linked to the so-called People's Courts, extraordinary courts that disregarded universally recognized judicial standards. They issued death and life imprisonment sentences in rapid sessions that lacked the simplest guarantees of justice. Trials were often broadcast on official television or held in public halls to send collective intimidation messages. Thus, justice ceased to be a tool for fairness and became a propaganda tool for terrorizing people. International human rights reports confirm that the regime relied on prolonged detention without trial as a fixed tool. Hundreds of political prisoners were denied access to judges for many years. These reports documented widespread unfair trials, travel bans, and severe restrictions on freedom of movement and expression. Universities turned into surveillance grounds where revolutionary committees pursued students and imposed strict limits on academic activities. This repressive structure was not incidental, but integral to the regime's philosophy. Gaddafi presented the revolutionary committees as guardians of the revolution, while in reality, he used them as tools to ensure absolute loyalty and to criminalize any dissent, no matter how minor, with the harshest penalties. In June 1984, Muammar Gaddafi's regime recorded one of the cruelest moments of public repression when the execution of al-Sadiq Hamid al-Shudi was carried out inside a sports hall in Benghazi in front of a crowd of students and members of the revolutionary committees. The event was not merely an execution, but a bloody spectacle intended to terrify the entire society. The so-called trial was nothing more than a prearranged session broadcast on official television, where al-Shudi was placed before a nominal judge and a loyalist panel, with the verdict predetermined. As soon as the session ended, the execution by hanging was carried out inside the hall in a shocking scene that left a deep impact on Libyans' collective memory. Al-Shudi's execution became a symbol of terror and a stark example of public executions in Libya during the 1980s, a period when Gaddafi sought to consolidate his rule through the revolutionary committees and a policy of spreading fear. To this day, this incident remains a symbol of human rights abuses in Libya, and one of the most prominent examples of the crimes of Gaddafi's regime. On June 29, 1996, Libya witnessed one of the most horrific crimes under Muammar Gaddafi's rule when about 1,200 prisoners were killed inside Abu Salim prison in Tripoli. Most of the victims were political detainees or regime opponents. The incident began with a protest inside the prison over poor humanitarian conditions and detention circumstances. Instead of addressing the demands legally, the regime resorted to deadly force. Security forces surrounded the prison and opened fire on the inmates in a massacre that lasted for hours. The regime imposed strict official silence, denying or downplaying the event for many years. The truth gradually emerged through survivor testimonies and documentation by human rights organizations like Human Rights Watch, which recorded the atrocity and considered it a blatant violation of international law. Families did not learn the fate of their loved ones until years of silence had passed. This ambiguity turned the case into a raw wound in Libya's collective memory, as victims' families continued to demand justice and truth, defying repression and fear. Over time, the Abu Salim case became a symbol for rights activism and took the form of weekly vigils in Benghazi since the early 2000s. These vigils, carrying victims' photos and chanting for justice, became a symbolic spark contributing to igniting the February 2011 uprising against Gaddafi's rule. At the start of the 1980s, Muammar Gaddafi's regime escalated its campaigns against Libyan dissidents abroad, labeling them as the stray dogs. This term was not mere rhetoric, but turned into a systematic policy relying on organized assassinations and surveillance operations in European capitals, aiming to spread terror within Libyan communities overseas and send a clear message that the regime's reach extends to anyone who opposes it, no matter how far. One prominent event occurred in London in 1984 when Libyan dissidents held a protest in front of the Libyan embassy, demanding democracy and an end to repression. Amid the chants, gunfire erupted from inside the embassy building, injuring several protesters and killing British policewoman Yvonne Fletcher, who was securing the demonstration site. Her death shocked British public opinion as it marked a British officer killed on UK soil by gunfire from a diplomatic mission supposedly protected by international immunity, a blatant breach of law and diplomatic norms. The incident triggered a major diplomatic crisis between London and Tripoli. Britain quickly severed relations with Libya and expelled all Libyan diplomats. Investigations faced significant obstacles due to diplomatic immunity protecting the suspects at the time. The case file remained open for decades, and Yvonne Fletcher's memory became a symbol in British media of the so-called Libyan state terrorism. The name of Muammar Gaddafi's regime became associated in the 1980s and 1990s with several terrorist operations that shocked the world and gave Libya a rogue state reputation accused of state terrorism. The most notorious was the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland on December 21, 1988, killing 270 people, the deadliest attack in UK history. After many years of investigation, a special court in the Netherlands convicted Libyan Abdelbasset al-Megrahi in 2001 as the direct perpetrator, confirming the operation's ties to the Libyan regime, though controversy over evidence and appeals continued. Less than a year after Lockerbie, Africa experienced a similar tragedy when UTA Flight 772 crashed over the Niger Desert in 1989, killing 170 people. In 1999, the Paris Criminal Court sentenced 6 Libyans, including Abdullah Sanusi, military intelligence chief, in absentia, as planners of the bombing. Beyond the verdict, a 2004 compensation agreement with Gaddafi's foundation amounted to $170 million, considered an indirect admission of responsibility. In West Berlin in 1986, another deadly attack targeted the La Belle nightclub, resulting in 3 deaths and 229 wounded, mostly American soldiers. After a lengthy trial, a German court ruled in 2001 that the attack had been planned by Libyan intelligence and involved the Libyan embassy in East Berlin. This attack provoked a swift and severe U.S. aerial strike on Tripoli and Benghazi that same month, marking one of the most intense phases of confrontation between Gaddafi and the West. Gaddafi's regime role extended beyond direct attacks to arming foreign armed movements. British parliamentary reports documented Libya's supply of the Irish Republican Army, IRA, from the 1970s to the 1990s, with large quantities of explosives, most notably the powerful Semtex, along with money and training. A major shipment was seized in 1987 aboard the vessel Exodus, loaded with tons of Libyan weapons. These supplies prolonged the Northern Ireland conflict and later sparked demands for compensation by victims targeted with Libyan arms. In late summer 1978, Imam Musa al-Sadr arrived in Libya on an official visit at the invitation of Muammar Gaddafi's regime. At the time, al-Sadr was a prominent Shiite leader in Lebanon, founder of the Amal movement, and a strong political and social figure in a country undergoing civil war. However, the visit ended in a mysterious disappearance that remains an unsolved mystery to this day. Imam Musa al-Sadr and his companions, Sheikh Mohammed Yaqub and journalist Abbas Badreddin, never returned from Tripoli. Since then, the case has been a constant source of tension between Beirut and Tripoli. Lebanon has always held Gaddafi's regime fully responsible for the disappearance, while Tripoli either remained silent or offered contradictory accounts. Over the decades, the case has grown heavier with each anniversary, becoming part of Lebanon's political and religious collective memory. In 2015, Hannibal Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi's son, became involved when Lebanese authorities detained him amid ongoing investigations. Since then, he remained held in Beirut as either a witness or a party, potentially holding keys to the truth. In 2024, the discussion was officially revived through new Lebanese-Libyan talks, aiming to uncover the fate of the disappeared imam, signaling that the case remains politically and legally alive and represents an open file that will not close until the truth is revealed. In 1995, Libyan authorities took a controversial step by deciding to collectively expel thousands of Palestinians from Libya. This decision reflected a tense political atmosphere where Gaddafi's regime used the Palestinian refugee card as a pressure tool against the Oslo Accords signed between the Palestine Liberation Organization and Israel. The direct impact was tragic. Entire families suddenly found themselves stranded at the Egyptian border without shelter or official documents, causing a severe humanitarian crisis documented by media reports and human rights organizations. The expulsion was considered a punitive measure that disregarded basic human rights and demonstrated the regime's willingness to exploit human lives as a bargaining chip in political conflicts. This mass expulsion was not isolated, but part of a continuous pattern of violations characterizing Libya in the 1990s. International reports documented widespread torture in prisons, long-term detentions without fair trials, and travel bans used to suppress opposition and silence critics. Authorities also imposed strict restrictions on freedoms of assembly and expression, where any attempt at protest or even public discussion outside official channels was met with immediate repression. These measures formed an integrated system of surveillance and control aimed at consolidating the power of the revolutionary committees and strengthening the security apparatus's authority. With the onset of the February 2011 uprising in Libya, peaceful demonstrations took to the streets calling for freedom and political reform. However, Gaddafi's regime did not respond by listening to the people's demands, but resorted to lethal force, using live ammunition against civilians alongside widespread arbitrary arrests, targeting activists, youth, and ordinary citizens. This pattern of abuses included not only field confrontations, but also enforced disappearances and persecution. prompting organizations like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International to warn that the situation might amount to crimes against humanity. In June 2011, the International Criminal Court took an unprecedented step by issuing arrest warrants against Muammar Gaddafi, his son Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, and military intelligence chief Abdullah Senussi, accusing them of murder and persecution of protesters. These warrants marked international recognition that the regime was not just exercising political power, but was engaged in systematic repression. One of the starkest examples of repression was the siege of Misrata, where media and international reports documented the use of cluster munitions and indiscriminate explosives against residential neighborhoods. Despite official denial by Libyan authorities, photos and videos provided conclusive evidence of widespread destruction. Hundreds of dead and wounded, overcrowded hospitals, and entire neighborhoods reduced to rubble. The siege symbolized the regime's readiness to use any means, regardless of severity, to suppress the revolution. Thus, the events of 2011 turned from a limited peaceful uprising into an international criminal case, placing the regime's leaders before the court of history. The issue ceased to be an internal matter and became a symbol of how an authoritarian power can descend into committing crimes against humanity, marking a pivotal chapter in Gaddafi's regime's record of crimes. And in the end, the legacy of 4 decades reveals how the state structure transformed into a machine of punishment, and how violence expanded from sports stadiums and prisons to the skies of the world through bombings and cross-border operations. Although the regime fell in 2011 and international arrest warrants were issued, transitional justice remains suspended amid conflicting narratives and the complexities of division. The enduring lesson is clear. There can be no stability without truth and accountability, and no national memory without recognition and reparations. This brings us to the end of today's video. Don't miss the chance to keep up with all new content by subscribing to the channel and activating the notification bell so you never miss an update.